Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Miles, I use they them pronouns, and I like to talk about books. If you are new here, thank you so much for joining. If you are a returning viewer, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. So today I am finally finishing my 2022 content by giving you a list of the worst or most disappointing books that I read in 2022. Some of these I do think were genuinely awful books, and some of them I totally get the value, but they just didn't work for me and they were disappointing for whatever reason. So I'm not hating on all of them, but I am definitely hating on some of them, and I think I'll make that clear. So yeah, let's throw it in here now. Disclaimer, if you liked these books, even if I'm calling them bad, like, I don't think you're stupid. We're all allowed to like whatever we like, and I'm just being a hater sometimes. And if you don't want to hear me be a hater, find another video. The one I published before this is my best books of 2022. And if you want more positivity, you should go over there. I am being a hater here. This is a space for hatred. So, first up, I think this was the second book that I read in 2022, and that was Tenders the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. And I did hate this book. This is one of the ones that I hated, and I just don't understand the hype around it. Like, this was so hyped up, and I think I gave it 1 star. It takes place in a future where all meat is not edible anymore, I think because of a virus or something, and somehow the logical solution with this is to start breeding humans for meat and eating them, which I understand that, like, I am a big horror fan, so I'm not like unable to suspend my disbelief. Like, I can do that. It's not usually a problem for me at all. But just like this book, from the very beginning, I was just like, this would not happen. Which I know is a mean thing to say, especially as a horror fan, because I get mad at people sometimes for not being able to suspend their disbelief, but I just could not with this. I was like, do you know how many like meat alternatives are around these days? I think this was written a couple years ago. Like, it still stands. And the way it was pulled off, I think, is what just really drove me crazy about this. It was gross for the sake of gross. You get a lot of scenes of like human farms. Fucking nasty. And it was just like trying as hard as it could to be disgusting. It was over the top. It was tasteless. I don't understand the point of this book. Any like class or political commentary was, first of all, extremely obvious and didn't add anything new to anything. And it was just fucking nasty. Also, like, so much like weird sex stuff going on here. The main character, like, I'm vaguely remembering this, so sorry if I'm wrong about some of this, but like, the main character takes one of the girls that's being like bred for meat and like keeps her and like sexually assaults her, and it's very disturbing. And I'm okay with unlikable main characters, but I was just like, are you serious? Like, why are we reading this? So it was really hyped up to me, and I was really looking forward to it, and it was god-awful. So sorry I hated this book. Unfortunately, this is an unpopular opinion, but next I have Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. This is one of the ones that is just disappointing, and I don't think it is a bad book. This is the only Sally Rooney book that I've read, and I'm not opposed to checking out her books in the future. Of course, I've heard that Normal People is good. I think I would like Conversations with Friends. But I wanted to start with this one because it had a lot of buzz when I read it in like February. It was just not for me. I did not enjoy it. I thought it was really boring. It follows 2 childhood best friends, like writing letters back and forth, maybe writing emails back and forth to each other about like what's going on in their lives. It centers a lot around their relationships with men, and I just thought their lives were really boring, and I really didn't like the couples, and I don't think the point was to like the couples. I don't think it's like a romance where it's like, oh my god, these guys are so cute. But they were just so unlikable, and like, I know, like, I am a lesbian, so maybe my standards are just higher than these women, but oh my god, like, they were really settling, and it was just kind of hard to read. because maybe that was some kind of commentary, but I just was not getting it. And I do think this is one of the circumstances where maybe I'm not smart enough for this book. But there were some things I just didn't like about it. I did like Sally Rooney's writing. I'll give her that. That was like probably the only thing that made it interesting, is that I liked her writing. But also the sex scenes, once again, I'm a lesbian, but it's not like I've never read a straight sex scene before. These ones were not it. It was bad. Also, the ending, spoiler alert, skipped to like 15 seconds. The way there was like a time skip and it ended with them being like, oh my God, COVID is happening. Why did we do that? Like, that just felt so weird and like self-indulgent to just sprinkle it in the last 20 minutes. Maybe I missed something. Did that mean something important? Was that poignant? Let me know if I'm just an idiot. I think I'm just gonna keep like putting these books in 1 out of 2 categories on not for me, disappointing, and bad. Next up is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. Unfortunately, this is a bad book, in my opinion. Okay, I was misled, which I do kind of feel like a dumbass, but regardless of if I was misled or not, like, this is still a bad book, in my opinion. It was advertised as, I have this written down. Okay, backstory. I love trashy sea horror, or any kind of sea horror. I love when it's good, but I also love when it's bad. And this was advertised to me on the cover. It says, a ghost ship, a salvage crew, unspeakable horrors. You would think that's an ocean horror, right? So I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited for this book. Like, this is right up my alley. I can't wait. No, it's a sci-fi. In space. Spaceship. Ghost spaceship. Not my deal. So I should have just not read it, but I was like, oh, we'll give it a shot. Like, I am not really a sci-fi person, but I'm always wanting to give it a shot. This was not good enough to justify science fiction to me whatsoever, unfortunately. This follows Claire, who is a worker on like a beacon repair crew in space, and she thinks she's like about to be out of a job when they return from this expedition. But then they get a strange distress signal and they go check it out because they're like, well, we're gonna get fired anyways, we might as well do whatever we want. And I think it's a ship called the Aurora, I think is what it's called. And it's a ship, a very famous ship that disappeared like 20 years ago. And no one's ever heard of it since. And it's a big deal. And they're like, oh my God, like, we have to go check this out. Like, this could make our careers. And they get there, they go on the ship, it's scary or whatever. It was just so fucking boring. All of the characters were really annoying, especially the main character. There was a romance that just like felt really out of place. Like, first of all, it wasn't scary enough. It felt like they thought it was really scary and it wasn't. And then they have this like shitty romance subplot that's going on that really disrupts any semblance of tension or fear that I am feeling. So that was annoying. I just really did not like this book. I said in my Goodreads review that this was like The Luminous Dead, but boring and straight. And I stand by that. I'm right. Next I have Hide by Kirsten White. I also think this is a bad book, unfortunately. Also just not something, I don't know why I thought I would like this book. It is part of that trope of like, children's game is actually scary and deadly now, which at the time was very popular because of like Squid Game, so everyone was really hyping it up, but like that trend has been dead for a while now, and I feel like it's pretty hard to do it well. And this did not do it well. This follows a girl who enters, a super edgy girl, you know, feels very like YA protagonist, even though I do not think this is YA, but she, you know, she's not like the other girls. She's strong and she's been through things, and she was just super fucking annoying. And she enters this competition that is basically just a giant game of hide and seek, and it takes place in an abandoned theme park because that's scary. And the winner gets like a ton of money, and you guys won't believe this. the people who lose actually die. I would have never seen that coming. So it was just boring. It was unoriginal. It wasn't scary. And honestly, I don't remember that much about this book at all. It was it's so insanely forgettable. There were gay people, there were lesbians, so I'll give them points for that, I guess. But like, that's like the only good thing I can say about this book. Next, we have The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, which I'm sure you've heard of this book. This follows a woman who, trigger warning for suicide. This follows a woman who kills herself and wakes up, and she's in the Midnight Library, where there's a librarian who's like, hey, you look at all these books. Each one that you pick off of the shelf, like, you get to go into another version of like what your life could have been. And I can't really remember. I think, does she have a chance of coming back to life? I don't think so. I haven't read this book in a long time, and I just have such a complicated relationship with this book. I originally gave it a 3.5, which is so wrong. I'm like going on Goodreads after I filmed this to change it because my opinion has changed. This book preyed on me when I was super depressed. I remember the day I listened to this, like all in one night. I was having a really hard time. I was very depressed, and this book made me cry a lot, so I was like, oh, it's good. Unfortunately, no, it's not. It was just like Hallmark card as a book. It's all like, no, like, don't kill yourself, like, life is so good when you think about it. And it's like, wow, thank you, Matt. Like, never thought about that before. I thought it was pretty insightful, but I'm literally chalking it up to how depressed I was on that day. I was so easy to impress on that one day that I listened to this audiobook. And I don't know, something about it stuck with me. However, I finished it the last like 2 hours the next day when I was feeling a little better, and I was like, oh my god, wait, this is so bad. The end of it just like devolved into like a bunch of like Pinterest quotes. It has nothing new to say about depression or suicide or anything like that. It just felt like such a sad attempt at like a self-help book, but it's just telling you shit that like you already know. Not worth your time. I'm going on to Goodreads to change my review because I was in a vulnerable state, okay? Like, not to be trusted. I was very depressed. Thank God I'm not anymore, right? Okay, not trying to start any drama, and I'm not gonna name the person. However, I'm talking about Off Season by Jack Ketchum. And there's a YouTuber that I no longer follow because she is a horror girl, and I really liked some of her recommendations. And then it was just like too many strikes of her recommending like weird shit that I was like, oh, this looks so good. And then I read it and I was like, oh my god, why, this is offensive. Why would anyone like this? She did that a few times, and then she also just said some really weird, some really sketchy shit that I did not like. So this was recommended to me by a YouTuber that I like kind of have beef with now. She doesn't know who I am. Like this, I don't have beef with her. You get what I'm saying. Off Season by Jack Ketchum. This follows a group of friends that are staying at a cabin in the middle of the woods in Maine. Wonderful setting. I was so excited. Also, I went into this like knowing it was going to be like a cheesy bad 80s horror, but I was really excited. I was really hoping it would give like Texas Chainsaw vibes, which is one of my favorite scary movies. Anyways, they're at this secluded cabin in Maine, and little do they know, there is a cannibal family living in these woods just in Maine. Like, this group of cannibals like living in a cave undetected. Forgive me if I'm looking at my notes because I have a lot of issues with this book and then the next book that I'm bringing up. Okay, the way this family is written is so fucked up. They are constantly referred to as savages, which just feels a little iffy. The fact that some of them are fat is, oh my god, Jack Ketchum loves that. That is like the only characterization they have is, oh my god, these people are so fat, so that's so disgusting. Like, don't you hate these characters? Like, they're villains. Aren't they so disgusting and repulsive? Personally, that's so fucking stupid. Just saying. And also just a trope that we really need to get rid of in horror. This was from the year before, but it was a Nick Cutter book. I can't remember what it was called. I'll put it up on the screen really quick. I DNF'd it, even though I enjoyed the trope. So fucking fat phobic within the first like 20%. It was just about like how disgusting and fat this main character's mom was and how disgusting she was. And it was like, can we stop doing this for characterization in horror? It's so fat phobic. It's weird. It's unnecessary. Make people fucked up because they're fucked up. Like, why do we have to do this? Anyways, Jack Ketchum loves doing that in this book. They're also all inbred, which I'm just throwing that out there as another thing to be like, oh my god, these guys are so fucking gross, which like just felt really unnecessary. Like, all of these things thrown together was really weird. Oh, also, some of them are mentally disabled, and that's also supposed to be really disgusting. On top of that, there's a bunch of needless sexual assault that just didn't need to happen. And I just don't understand this book. Like, you can only say like it's a product of its time for so many things. And once again, I'm a big horror fan. I've had to do that before for some books. And some books I do genuinely believe are a product of their time. This is just like, there's so many offenses, and it is offensive. Like, no hate, but how does this book have so many fans? This is a bad book. I don't think I'll read anything from Jack Ketchum ever again, even though he has been recommended to me a lot. It just seems like Stephen King, but way worse. Why would you watch this when you could watch, why would you read this when you could watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Like, this seems like what people wanted. Just watch that. It was terribly written. It was gross for the sake of gross. It was misogynistic, ableist, fatphobic, classist. You name it, baby. It was the worst. It contributed nothing to the literary world. It wasn't even bad in a good way. That's all I got on Off Season. Fuck that book. Okay, so next I am going to be looking at my laptop a lot because of this. I literally have written a whole page about this one book. It was one of my most anticipated books of the entire year, and 100% the most disappointing book that I read. And that is Summer Sons by Lee Mandello. I also haven't read this in a long time, so that is why I will also be looking at my notes. But this follows two boy best friends, Andrew and Eddie, and they were very close, if you know what I mean, growing up. A little suspiciously close. One of them, Eddie, I think, moves early to go to college at Vanderbilt, and they're studying folklore, which, if you know me, I am literally studying folklore. This is also very like Southern Gothic-esque, and like that is so up my fucking alley. I was so excited for this book. I was so hyped. I had like the hardcover and everything, which I have gotten rid of since because I didn't even like looking at this book because of how disappointed I was. Okay, so Eddie, Andrew, besties. Eddie leaves to go to Vanderbilt early, and Andrew is going to follow him eventually. But a few days before Andrew goes, just a few days before, Eddie dies of an apparent suicide. But Andrew doesn't believe that, so he's on the case. So here's where like my issues begin. This book like claims to be steeped in folklore, and it just wasn't. Like, it barely talked about folklore. I'm reading The Secret History right now and really enjoying it, but it has like a similar thing where it's like you're getting every aspect of these people's lives except like what they're studying in school, which is like kind of the reason why you're there. Secret History is really well written and really entertaining, so I can look past that. This was so fucking boring. This was so hard to get through. This took me like months to get through. and it was my most anticipated book of the year. I didn't want to listen to it on audiobook because I was so excited to read it. There was just like a little bit of folkloric influence here and there. I wrote down that it took around 250 pages to even see Andrew do any work regarding folklore studies. And I get that he was grieving, and I get that like the whole thing is like he's trying to figure out the mystery of what happened to Eddie. But like, you couldn't have given us like any fun folklore stuff? Because like there really was not any. It was just like the most compelling aspect of the book for me, and it got pushed to the background and like never thought of again. And I was just like, this is not fair. Another issue I had was with the writing here, specifically during like the supernatural parts when Eddie would like visit Andrew or whatever. Oh my God, it was so confusing. Like, please tell me, if you've read this book, how, like, what was I missing? What the fuck was going on when there were ghosts in this? It was written so weirdly that it was so hard to understand like what was even happening. And all of these scenes where he was like visited or like possessed by Eddie kind of were all written like exactly the same. It was incredibly repetitive and really confusing to read, and I don't feel like it added anything. And because of that, it almost felt like there was like no paranormal aspect to this book because the only paranormal parts were so confusing and weird. At the end of this book, like, I can't tell you what the mechanics of this haunting are, how that works, what ghosts are in this universe, because of the scenes with them were so confusing. There were also so many subplots in this book that were like not explored at all or like were totally wasted. There's this whole during the whole book, you're trying to figure out what happened to Eddie's notes, because Andrew is always like, oh my God, like whoever killed Eddie took all of his notes. That's if whoever has the notes killed him. And so the whole time you're like, oh my God, like who stole his notes? They weren't stolen. It was like a mix-up. It was revealed in like one inconsequential line. And that was seriously like one of the major questions in the beginning of this book. So all of these issues and more combined to make this like my worst reading experience of the year. I hated this book so much. And it's hard because I know some people that liked this, and I don't think it is a bad book. But for me, like, it kind of felt like false advertising. It just wasn't what I came there for at all. Like, it was just pining and pining and pining, and oh my God, my dead friend, I wanted to have sex with him so bad, but it's so repressed. And it's just like, oh my God. I listened to audiobooks like while I was trying to finish this over the span of like a month. And so that helped, but oh my God, like it sent me into like a physical reading slump, 100%. I fucking dragged myself to the end of this book, like forced myself to read the last 50 pages after not having picked it up for like weeks. I hated this book. I'm so sorry. Who wrote this? Lee Mandello? I'm sorry, but this was not it for me. Last but not least, we have a repeat offender, John Darnielle. He wrote Universal Harvester, which I also really did not like last year, and I talked about that in one of my wrap-ups. One of the worst books I read last year. And unfortunately, Devil House by John Darnielle is one of the worst books that I read this year. This is one that it's towing the line between actually bad and just not for me, because I can't really tell. A lot of people agree with me though. This book is just so bizarre. I've literally never understood what people would say what people meant when they would say a book was overwritten until I read this book, because oh my God, this book was so overwritten. It had an interesting concept initially, but it just felt like Darnielle took the most tedious, uninteresting path to complete this concept. It follows a true crime writer who moves into this old house called the Devil House to write a book about it. Very sinister vibes. And so that's like the main plot line, but you get like 4 different plot lines. Do you like this visual? 4 different plot lines about the Devil House, and one specific one, if you've read this book, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Where the fuck did this like medieval castle ass chapter come from? It's so weird. You're reading this book and, you know, one section is set in like modern day. Another is set in like, I don't know, a while ago, in like the 70s or something. I don't fucking know. They're set in different time periods, but like all pretty grounded in reality. And of like, here's this guy writing about the Devil House. Here's this scary thing that happened at the Devil House 20 years ago. And here's this scary thing that happened at the Devil House 100 years ago. Cool, I'm there. Even though it was pretty boring and meandering and kind of confusing. But there's this one chapter that it literally is like a medieval story with like knights and shit. Each part of this book was just like so different in tone, and it felt so like meandering. And I'm sorry, John Darnell, if you're watching this, stop, because it felt like he thought he was writing like an epic, like a really cool horror novel that like everyone would want to be there for as long as humanly possible. Unfortunately, I don't think anyone did, and he just kept drawing it out and out and out and making it so meandering and boring and constant perspective shifts that made it really confusing to read. This book was very confusing. So like, you know what? Maybe I'm not smart enough to get it. Like maybe that's on me. But I just did not like this fucking book. And I don't think I'll ever be reading anything by John Darnell ever again, and I am sorry about that. Just, not my guy. So there are all of the most disappointing books that I read in 2022. I haven't really been like this much of a hater on camera before, so I'm kind of self-conscious about dropping this. I hope no one thinks that I was too mean or anything. This is all in good fun. Like, did I call some books bad? Yes. But if you liked them, like, I am not fucking hating on you. There's some books that I love that are so fucking bad, and that is okay. If you've stuck around to the very end, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you liked this new kind of negative video that I feel like I've stayed away from because I don't want to be too mean, but also I am a hater. Like, I do like to be mean. So I hope you enjoyed this. I would love to know down in the comments below, did you read any of these books? What did you think about them? And please tell me what some of your least favorite books of the year were. I would love to hear it. Be a hater in the comments down below. This is a safe space for you. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to. I'm almost at 500 subscribers, which is so cool and like so crazy. I feel so special. I started last year, I think, with like 150 subscribers, and I mean, that was still fucking crazy, but it is crazy that I have grown so much in the past year, and I am just incredibly grateful. But yeah, like and subscribe if you want to. Leave a comment down below. I would love to hear from you, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye.